There is a black sheep living in the Total War family, but as remains the fate of many black sheep, this one is sadly misunderstood. Offering hardcore campaigns, a varied unit roster, an amazing UI, and a literal horde of improved mechanics, Total War Attila is not just a misunderstood Total War for one reason in particular, but it's actually my personal favorite modern Total War game. And in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly why it should be yours as well, especially when it's on sale, as it happens to be right now. And by the way, while I have you here, only 8% of people watching this video are subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy my content guys, it would just mean so much to me if you took the time to make a simple click and sub to the channel. It goes a long way in helping my content reach further and hopefully also help you in knowing when there's new content to be enjoyed. I'd really appreciate it. Most Total War games either take place in golden ages or depict empires in relatively easy starting phases. Rome 2 sees Rome right before it's about to truly take off, Medieval 2 offers factions that are easy to manage internally from the start, and the Warhammer series has most if not all factions begin with just a single piece of territory, easily managed. But not Total War Attila, oh boy, no sir. The year 395 AD is not a year of celebration, not even a decade of celebration really. The Roman Empire has long since been torn in two, its internal differences and challenges too great to keep intact and ruled by one man, all the while conflict is brewing on the empire's borders. And the threat of one people and one man in particular is something that will shape this entire campaign. And just with that, Creative Assembly changed the entire premise of a Total War game. Instead of beginning small and expanding, the Roma boost of Total War will see the entire world upside down. You now begin with one of two enormous empires, truly enormous this time, covering the majority of this map's territories. But not even the Roman empires are made similar to each other here. Remember that time when there were red, green, and blue Romans like there were Pokemon games? If you want to go for the ultimate in Total War challenges, try your hand at the Western Roman Empire. If you've been following my channel, you know exactly how much I love this campaign, and I think it's for quite a good reason. The West might not be the most glamorous faction, might not be the most reliable faction, and it's definitely not in it to make you feel comfortable. Let me put it this way, playing the Western Roman Empire is like trying to tame a wild horse while you are simultaneously attempting to squeeze caviar back into the tube as it's beaming out in 40 kilometers per hour. And I know that made my Norwegian friends hungry just thinking about that caviar. The West is decadent, okay? That's all I'm trying to say. It might look okay from far up here. In fact, it looks deliciously massive right here. But zoom down and you'll see that nothing is as it seems. Whether we find ourselves in Italy, Iberia, North Africa, Gaul, or even Britain, you're facing either one of two things, or indeed both of them at the same time. All over the empire, the battle for the hearts and minds of the Romans are fought between Christian and pagan. When also considering that most of your provinces are left without governors and increasing squalor from poor public hygiene and barbarian migration, the internal conflict is complete. Consider also the border provinces. In the north, you're likely to either lose territories to your own Roman rebels or southern moving barbarian tribes who find Roman lands tasty. But the situation is the exact same in the south, where Numidian tribes are on the move and always looking for a Roman weak spot. Turns out there's about 1 million of them of course, but that's ultimately what makes this campaign so extremely fun and challenging. Here, we are actually forced to strategically calculate which losses we can accept and which we can't, all from turn 1. Some of the more competitively minded players, or those wishing for an easier time, might just abandon the entirety of the empire except for Italy. But personally, I think that's kind of a cop-out. For the ultimate experience, I recommend playing as if you need to save everything, holding on for remote backwaters like Britannia, and only then see everything crumble around you. Being in the Western Roman Empire alone is of course not what enables this fun of an experience. For that, we can thank Attila's unique and deep mechanics. Now some might consider Attila nothing but a darker version of Rome 2, but I disagree heavily. In fact, I believe it's CA's finest work yet. Let's begin with perhaps the most influential feature, namely hordes. The horde mechanic is an essential part of Attila, not just because it shapes the factions playing them, but because they enable time-appropriate mechanics. Instead of only offering standard factions with settled towns and cities, like Rome 2, several of Attila's factions begin as army-only peoples, meaning they move across the world unbound by cities. What's awesome is that they can still develop though, having unique horde-only buildings they can raise as an army on campaign. Imagine Caesar's troops in Gaul, or indeed nomad camps on the steppes. While nowhere near as defensible and long-term prosperity focused as cities, it still gives them a living chance outside of regular civilization. This might make them easy to defeat, you're now thinking, but hold on just a second. Hordes are fast-moving and unreliable, and since they have no cities for you to sack and sabotage, it can be hard to figure out how to deal with them, or indeed how powerful they are. In addition, I love that settled factions can actually offer hordes their own land to settle down in, often in exchange for better relations and a safeguard against incoming invasions. This makes dealing with hordes a multifaceted challenge also for the regular factions, who must weigh their varying options. In addition, Attila does a fantastic job at personifying our generals without making a game all about them. This game finally allows us to pass out governor titles, meaning we have an added sense of depth concerning the general governing our empire, especially as the edict system returns from Rome 2. We also have similar titles for generals, who climb the ladder of power the more experienced they become. This further affects the loyalty rating of our generals, because you see, not only is your population close to revolting, but you constantly have to make sure your generals and governors remain loyal. And not only do you have to keep track of your generals, but the armies themselves might have had enough, meaning their integrity is another point of conflict. If you're not making sure your generals are happy and that your armies are treated well, as in not losing battles, left out in the cold to suffer attrition, or other similar bad vibes, you might just keep them there. If not, you can always literally murder 10% of them through decimation, but that is always a last resort. An awesome resort, but still, better make it the last one. There's of course even more that Attila offers. If you thought that at least farming would be easy, think again, because Attila comes with a fertility system, and it's absolutely genius. See, in many aspects, this game is a battle against time. The same goes for fertility. Every region in the game has a specific level of fertility, and the higher the level, the more food and money you'll get from farming them. This not only makes certain provinces extremely useful in a strategic sense, but there's more. We've kind of skipped it thus far, but Total War Attila is of course also about Attila and the Huns. And even though it's mostly about the horde life, the entire campaign revolves around the coming of Attila as a kind of final boss. On the way there though, the coming of Attila, even the whisper, brings with it climate change. And climate change, well, really only works in one way. It decreases the fertility of every province over time, and by the time Attila comes, it's likely to be quite barren, especially in Northern Europe. This means it's probably the wisest to focus on creating good farmlands in the south or in regions with high fertility to begin with, because that's where the food investment will pay off in the long run. There's of course even more to deal with here, as both you and your enemies can leave cities in complete desolation. This leaves a settlement barren and makes it hard for new or recovering empires to rebuild or indeed conquer, but it can also work as a good buffer zone of sorts if you realize that retaking certain cities will be difficult. And while it might feel kind of unfair if the AI decides to steamroll you and just waste every city in the vicinity, well, I have one word for you: skill issue. All of this is of course wrapped into one of the most beautiful UIs ever made in Total War, perhaps just short of Total War Troy's. Attila's UI is minimalistic in the best sense, leaving a lot of room for the main screen, but with each window offering either beautiful concept art, unit cards, building cards, family tree and government oversight, or indeed the overlay map itself. I can't stress enough how much of a difference this UI makes compared to Rome 2 for me, or indeed versus most modern Total War games, because here I can actually see what the buildings look like in concept and not some abstract image of grain or a fish. It immerses me more than Rome 2 or Warhammer 3's UI ever could, and for that, Attila's style, much like it appeared in the original Rome, Medieval 2, and even Shogun 2, is legendary, and I desperately need it to return. I tend to focus on the Roman empires in my Attila talks because they're my favorite ones, but there's a whole ton of diversity here. The Eastern Roman Empire is easier to play than the Western, but might run into similar challenges over time, and might even run into Attila the Hun first. Like the empire building playstyle, but want some variation and spice? Play as the Sassanid Empire to the east, and hit the Eastern Roman Empire where it hurts the most. Want to play as both settled and horde faction barbarians? Well, that's all well and good, as both Northern Early Danes, Franks, and Gothic factions are all at your fingertips. The Huns themselves is of course an option, and here you actually get to wait for Attila to become a man, and use him yourself to destroy the might of Rome. This also lets you play various styles of warfare. The Romans might like to hunker down and feel more comfortable on the defensive, while both the Sassanids and the Jews play very differently, either more hit and run tactics or all-out barbaric aggressive warfare. But no matter the faction, Attila allows defensive siege engines on walls, defensive barriers which may or may not be to your detriment no matter your side, and screen space reflection effects Rome 2 could only hope for. Of course, not everything concerning this game is good, and it's the reason why I initially referred to it as the Black Sheep. And it really is a big downside considering that I'm taking the time to mention this for like the millionth time. On the best hardware running Intel GPUs, Attila actually manages to run relatively fine, but even on the best of hardware, the performance is varied and unpredictable at best, both on the campaign map and on the battlefield. It's a massive shame too, because Attila is beautiful in its own twisted sense, and if you just manage to get the performance up through sheer raw power, you're gonna have a fantastic time. Especially is this true for its expansions, The Last Roman and Age of Charlemagne, both of which take place on more performance-friendly campaign maps for some reason. But whatever you do, and if you have one takeaway from this entire video, most of the shadow settings are bugged. So I say to you, leave shadows on high, always, no matter the occasion, and see your frame rate double. As always, I urge CA to return to Attila for no other reason than to fix their performance issues, because if they were fixed, this would definitely be a Total War I would recommend to everyone, no matter their hardware. But another reason to return or approach Attila for the first time is because this, by some miracle, happens to be the epicenter of Total War's modding renaissance. Not only do we already have amazing mods like Total War Medieval Kingdoms 1212, a total conversion mod taking this game right into the High Middle Ages, several ancient Roman era mods that are arguably even better than Rome 2 itself, and perhaps most exciting, modders have finally cracked the campaign map code of this engine and even more, meaning we might soon see a full overhaul mod featuring a Lord of the Rings campaign. I am insanely excited for that and its ramifications for Total War modding as a whole, but until then, there's already a ton of mods out there to love and cherish. Total War Attila might be a rough gem, but it is a gem altogether, and one I constantly hail as the best Total War game ever, despite nostalgia for other games and despite its performance issues. If you have played Attila or have thoughts on the game and this video, let me know in the comments. As always, make sure to leave a like and sub to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!